Hi, everyone. It's Jennie and Laurie of Astropath, and we are here today to talk about the Scorpio full moon. And before we go further, there's dates involved here, and I'm going to let Jennie tell you what the dates involved are.
Oh, okay. Well, the Scorpio full moon is on April 23rd. So that's the big news. This is the full moon of the new moon. That was a solar eclipse on April 8th. And Taurus sun is that, well, the sun just moved into Taurus on April 19th. So just to kind of orient us.
Okay, good. Now we are feeling well oriented. And we'll go on. So, yeah, thanks for watching us. We want to, before you go any further, please like our video and subscribe to our channel. It really helps us a lot. Also, I want to take a moment here to say thank you to all our new followers. We've had a lot of new followers recently, and we're delighted to have you here. Yeah, subscribe, leave us comments, let us know what you're thinking, and we'll keep making these videos and you can keep following us. So happy full moon.
Yes.
Happy full moon. So what we want to really talk about here is that this is the full moon from the eclipse, the big eclipse. How many people in this country watched that eclipse? I don't know. I remember reading somewhere like 3 million people were in the path or something like that. It's really amazing to look on social media and see all the images of all the people looking up at the sky. And it's like, oh my God, I've spent my whole life looking up at the sky, and now everybody, yeah, it's a wonderful thing. It was wonderful to be lucky enough. Jennie and I both were lucky enough to see that eclipse. And if you're watching this, I hope you did too. Tell us what you thought.
Yeah, that's really amazing. Yeah, and it's like we can't really talk about this full moon without mentioning that solar eclipse because in our moon cycle, it always starts with a new moon, and that's when the sun and the moon come together, and they they really came together exactly for this eclipse. So that was the new moon on April 8th again, and now we're at the full moon. Like we're in the moon cycle. It's about a month-long cycle in terms of the astronomy, and you have the new moon at the solar eclipse on April 8th. A week later, we had our waxing half moon that was in Cancer on April 15th. And then now we're at the full illumination, where after the sun was obscured by the moon, now the sun is illuminating the moon. So we're in a completely different, in many ways, um, totally different part of the cycle when you really think about that because of the eclipse happening. So, and then just to finish the cycle, 1 week later, you have the waning half moon, and then it comes back around to the balsamic moon, the dark moon, and starts all over again at the new moon. So it's a basically a 4 week cycle, just roughly, and that's what we're always talking about. And the full moon really shows us the results of whatever thing was planted at the new moon, right?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because there's a few things I want to say. One, I want to say follow Jennie's blog because she does write up for each of the quarter moons. And I really want to mention that because I feel like you do such a good job with those write-ups of the first quarter, the last quarter. And I think it would do people a lot of good to really understand the full cycle in that way. But with this one, it's so interesting because generally speaking, with new moons, we talk about planting seeds and, preparing the ground and planting seeds. And then the full moon is the illumination of that. And yet for an eclipse, it feels like it's more karmically connected. There's more of you don't really have the opportunity to decide and plant a seed. It's sort of something is going on that is not under your control in the same kind of way. And it's interesting to think about that eclipse as the moon hiding the sun and the sun being totally obscured by the moon for those few minutes. And now at the full moon, the sun turning around and shining its full light on the moon. So it's such an interesting thing to think of the moon hiding the sun and now the sun giving all its light to the moon. And to me, it feels sort of like some, that eclipse being a moment where life pivots in a particular way, and we can't see it because it's behind the moon. But now at the full moon, we begin to get some clarity. We begin to see what is coming out of that pivot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the eclipse also really shows us, like I like how you said it's something that's not within your control, because it is. It's usually something that emerges out of your unconscious. That's what the eclipse symbolizes. It's something that, you may not have thought you were going to be planting any seeds to do with that, yet something comes up. So ask yourself, what has come up? And think about hot emotions because it was Aries. Like, what has come up? Because those are just trying to get your attention. And then this full moon is going to shed some more light on what came out of your unconscious and what you need to take some kind of action on. And because it's a pivot, I'm sorry, because it's an eclipse, it's a longer cycle. It's a 6 month cycle. So we're not necessarily talking about, you may still not have a clue what is pivoting, and that's fine because it is a slower cycle. And full moon's in Scorpio. I mean, Scorpio is not exactly the most revealing sign. I mean, it's totally the opposite. It's the sign of hidden things. It's the sign of secrets. So there's an interesting juxtaposition where maybe you're just going to get to see a glimmer
Yeah.
of the next thing, or maybe some of you will be like, "Oh my God, I can see all the way down into the chasm." Like I don't know. It depends on people's individual experience, and it's kind of slightly a mixed message, don't you think, Laurie? Just a tiny bit.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, we're coming, this full moon is happening very shortly after the sun moved into Taurus,
Hmm.
and very shortly after Uranus and Jupiter conjuncted. And I want to just take this moment to suggest, if you have not watched some of these other videos, if you watch the video that we put out about the eclipse, if you watch the video that we put out about the Uranus Jupiter conjunction, you'll take on a deeper understanding of all of this process. But it's like we had those, the sun move into Taurus, we had this Uranus Jupiter conjunction, and now the sun is really doing what it can to calm us down. And in calming us down, it's showing us the moon. It's showing us that deep intensity. And yeah, there is a sort of a hidden or a privacy around Scorpio, but the sun is, I feel like the sun in its opposition, and I think you said this in when we were preparing about stabilizing emotion, at that opposition point. The sun in Taurus is is bringing its warmth to try to stabilize our emotions following these intense processes that we're all in the middle of. And
Mm,
yeah, oppositions, full moons are a moment of awareness and a time when we can adjust.
mm,
As we see what's coming into life, into light, we can make adjustments that are necessary.
mm. Yeah, no, I really think that the fact this is a Scorpio full moon after two, it's a little bit like there's an emotional repercussion of this eclipse. And actually, before I say that, I want to say that we are primarily emotional beings. We run from the limbic brain, is one of the oldest parts of the brain, and that's our feelings and our emotions. So this is it's more like an ancient part of you that is responding to the changes that we all know are afoot on multiple levels. And so this is an opportunity to kind of go, okay, I may not know all the repercussions of this, but I'm starting to see what they are, and I need to allow those to be seen so that I can kind of go, okay, and operate from that, almost like, watching and dealing with your own emotions and kind of holding them and letting them happen and seeing what they are and just being curious about it. Like use the investigative part of Scorpio to watch what's happening. Because it's kind of like, I mean, Scorpio's water. So it's like the ripple effect. If there's an earthquake on land, the water has a tidal wave, and so there's and then the water will settle after it's been through that. And so that's kind of what we're working with. Like I keep thinking about leading into the fixed part. Scorpio is a fixed sign, Taurus is a fixed sign, and that's kind of that ability to maintain or sustain. I mean, even though Scorpio, does have that reputation for being perhaps kind of volatile or unpredictable. But I really think that that comes when one doesn't know oneself. And if you are dealing with if you're trying to deal with these deeper feelings, that's what you need to be doing. Like, it doesn't have to be perfect. We can't see everything. There's just still too many things. This is too long of a process. But there is something in here about acknowledging and accepting, the wave effect on your feelings of all these
Mm,
changes.
I like that. The wave effect on our feelings.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very emotional time, and yet the sun in opposition is helping support the deeper work with it,
Mm.
and the
Mhm.
stabilization of it. That's
Yeah.
fascinating. Fascinating. Okay,
Yeah.
are we ready to open the
Sure.
chart?
Yeah, let's talk about the aspects to this business.
Okay, let's open this up. And there's
I like
absolutely nothing here to look at except
I like Laurie's this
Scorpio
is
Full
Laurie's
Moon.
artistic rendition of
So
my
here, the full moon happens at 7:48 p.m. in Eastern daylight time. So, if you're in a different time zone, be sure to change your time for that. And here's the chart of the moment. So
hmm
there we have the sun at 4 degrees Taurus and the moon at 4 degrees Scorpio. Now, what do we notice is in play here, Jenny? Whew.
Well, I think I like how you've included the sun moon midpoint on this chart, which is great because then you can see right away that sun moon midpoint, which is down at the bottom, is right next to Pluto. So that lets you know right away that this full moon, Pluto's in play, our Pluto in Aquarius. And shameless plug, watch our video on Pluto and Aquarius. So, but just really actually because if you look at that and you look at these other videos, you're going to be able to map out what's happening for yourself, and get to see it through this astrological metaphorical lens. But so basically what we're saying here is Pluto is very firmly in the mix. It is squaring both of these. So remember, a square aspect is pressure, it's growth, it's conflict. But it's, in a word, it's the aspect that makes everything happen. It's the
Mhm.
aspect that forces each of us to grow, like whether you like it or not. Like, we have to grow. That's what we're here. Our consciousness is growing. When you're a child, you have to grow into an adult. There's all these themes around that. And so that's what's happening here. And Pluto's really exerting a pressure here. I mean, the fact that it's the square to both is really clear message around the transformation that's going on. And I know that's an overused keyword for Pluto, but it is accurate. And we're talking about a long, slow process because it's going to be in Aquarius for 20 years. And we're going to have multiple moments like this where
Mhm.
Pluto plays in with these full moons or plays in during sun seasons or other aspects. But for right now, this is just adding extra pressure on, like, yep, things really are changing into something completely different than what they were, and that can be on a personal level, that can be on a global level. And then back to that commentary about the Scorpio full moon's job is just to kind of help us go, yep, I'm gonna allow this. I'm gonna watch the ripple effect. I'm gonna watch and acknowledge my emotions. So
You
I
know
don't know.
what? Well, when I look at that, the opposition between the sun and the moon and the awareness that an opposition always brings, it's like you cannot look at that awareness. You cannot look and consider the awareness of, trying to calm down these powerful emotions without taking into account this deep, profound change that's happening kind of underground in whatever house you have Aquarius, where Pluto is moving. So yeah, you can't just say, oh, the Taurus sun is calming down my deep emotions. Well, yeah, but you have to take into consideration what that bigger, deeper, long-term shift is telling you as well.
hmm
It's
Yeah.
interesting.
And some of it is, I think of this as since we're natal astrologers and we really focus on the individual. It's just kind of like, yeah, it is you needing to kind of work with the intensity of the feelings, and like work with them in your body, work with them through your conversations with people, work, whatever means necessary. If you're in therapy, awesome, use that. exercise, like all of these things are just going to help you work with the emotional content. And that's what I think about on the individual level. And yeah, just be curious with the Aquarius change. It's like evokes a curiosity even in a time of, I don't know, maybe struggling with survival on some levels, because it's Scorpio, but just trying to keep that door open, which is a challenge. I'm not going
But
to sugarcoat it, but
yeah, it's interesting too. We want to think about what planet rules Scorpio. And so that's going to bring us, because we do use the traditional rulerships for the most part, we're going to be looking here at the fact that Mars rules it. And where do we find Mars? Mars is in Pisces. Mars is right in between Saturn and Neptune. So what does that suggest? What does that suggest to you, Jenny?
right. Well, it's interesting. Mars has just come off this conjunction with Saturn. That's a
Yeah.
really intense and interesting conjunction that can be really difficult, but it can be more positive. There's like a whole array of different things here. I like to think of it as, Mars is being forced to be structured. That Saturn is the planet that slows everything down, and Mars is the planet that speeds everything up. So if you put them together in a constructive way, they have a lot to offer because you can really think about long-term plans, what
Mhm.
action to take now for long-term plans, And so Mars is moving away from that conjunction. It happened on April 10th, which is when we're making this video. um, and Mars is now moving towards Neptune, which is so different. It is so different from Saturn. Now it's kind of like being asked to bathe in the collective waters, of just kind of like this big, dreamy, imaginative space. I see it, it's almost like if Mars is, I mean, it's already cooler because it's in Pisces, but this really is like a hot poker into psh, and really bringing that heat right down. And what is it bringing down? It's moving us away from the idea, this is just my opinion, but from individual action, me, to being like, well, yeah, but how does your me affect collective? How does it maybe help to alleviate suffering in your community? Or, how does it play in here? How does it expand the notion of Mars in a
Yeah.
way that might be challenging, but ultimately healthy for all of us, the planet, That's
It
what I
is
think. What do you
interesting
think?
just thinking about Mars connecting with Saturn, and sort of like that is the beginning of a cycle of really bringing energy to this place of stability. And then it's going to, very soon afterwards connect with Neptune, bringing the energy that we've kind of stabilized there with Saturn. And now we're bringing it into that, like you said, the collective space, kind of a dreamier space as well. And Mars will be happy to move into Aries sometime in the relatively near future here. It'll
Yeah,
be
it's definitely
happy to do so.
swimming.
Yeah.
It's swimming through the ocean and it's
Yeah.
ready to get to its home.
Yeah.
Um,
And
yeah.
speaking of getting to its home, we've got another planet
Oh
doing the
yeah.
same thing, Venus, which rules the sun. So the reason we want to look at Mars and Venus here is because Mars rules the Scorpio moon and Venus rules the Taurus sun. So Venus is getting ready within a few days, I think, after this full moon. Venus will be moving right into Taurus, and they do it at the same time, don't they? Mars and Venus.
It's pretty close. Venus
Pretty
moves
darn.
in. Yeah, it's like a day apart.
Yeah,
Venus moves in first, which we like
yeah,
because it goes into Taurus first, and
yeah.
then Mars moves into Aries. Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting whenever you have these lunations of polarization, like, this is one of the Venus versus Mars kind of polarization. And so it's worthwhile to look at what both those planets are doing, which is what we're doing, but also in this case, they're connected by a minor aspect, very minor aspect, which is a semi-sextile. And I don't want to get all into whatever that is. But what is interesting is thinking about them being next door to each other in signs.
Mhm.
So completely different signs. I mean, Pisces and Aries are so different. And, Venus is essentially escaping Mars's territory before Mars gets into it. And we're talking about like Venus is like, in the getaway car, like trying to drive quickly out of Aries because it's sick of all that heat. It's tired of all the, all the violence, the hot, everything, and it just can't wait to get to its beautiful home in Taurus that it got to, design and create. So there's something funny about Venus being here and just really it looking forward 6 days ahead to get into Taurus. And same with Mars. They're both kind of like, all right, we've been here, done that. Like, can we please get
Yeah.
into our domiciles, our places where they're both in charge and happy? Interesting to see that.
Yeah. Yeah. Mars getting out of the dream space into its aggressive area, and Venus getting out of that war zone into its comfy bed.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. The only other thing I want to add, just because I think it's important, and we mentioned this in the Uranus Jupiter video, but Mars is very nicely sextile Jupiter here. We like that. That's
Oh
really,
yeah.
yeah, that kind of, yeah, that just makes things, it adds to the idea of like, okay, everything's gonna, like there's a breathing room here. Everything's gonna settle a bit. There is some opportunities. Like we need things to change. We need things to shift. What are the benefits of those changes? What are the benefits of those shifts?
Yeah.
How can they help us?
Yeah, we talked about that a lot, I think, in the Uranus Jupiter video. So be sure to watch that. There's so
Yeah.
much going on right now, and you do well to watch them all. So,
Yeah.
anything else before we move on?
Mercury's still retrograde. Mercury's
Oh,
going to go
yes.
direct pretty soon here. Mercury goes direct on the 25th. So this is the final throes of its retrograde period in Aries, and it will be turning around at its 15 degrees 59. That it will then station direct and go back over Chiron, and it'll eventually catch up to Venus and the Sun and so on. Um, yeah, I think that's it. That just kind of reverses that energy, that real internalizing. We've had this very internal period, and now it's kind of like and directing that back out. How do you use your new lessons, the new things you've learned about how to use Aries energy? How do you use that and redirect it? So
So,
yeah,
so interesting. The only other thing I want to say is just looking at this chart, you see everything is in these four signs. So,
still,
if you look at your own chart, look at the houses that hold Aquarius, Pisces, Aries, and Taurus. That's where the action is taking place. At this full moon, we are looking at the house that holds Scorpio, but the real, the longer term activity is all in those four
no,
areas.
whole third of everybody's life is like
I
kind of
know.
being projected to all this stirring up. So interesting. All
Interesting
right.
indeed. Okay, let's go on and talk about the individual pieces.
Okay.
So, if you've got Aries rising, we're looking at a situation here where the full moon itself is happening in your eighth house, and the eighth house is the area of life where we really have to, we're tasked with navigating issues, other people's other people, and share things as well. The eighth house is shared resources, shared values, and other people's values, resources, etc. So that's kind of what the focus is of what you may be seeing. Now we want to think back. The eclipse somehow created a pivot in your life that was very, very personal. You may not have any real awareness of it at this point. Like what has pivoted within your own personality? And
Mhm.
that pivot at this full moon, you can see a glimmer of what it's about. And it is going to begin being revealed through the activities where you are navigating other people's deep issues.
Mm.
So I think that's really the crux of it to me. The backdrop of it is the intense change that's going on in terms of the community that supports you. So, look at how these things really work together, how the pivot of your personality is being revealed as you kind of stabilize your own resources and your own self-worth. You are able to see somehow what your new way of navigating other people's values, how you have to set boundaries, and how all of that is connected to the community that supports you.
Mm. Hmm. Yeah. All right. Yeah, I think I like how this one, yes, I have a cat on my lap.
Yes, I just noticed the cat and I'm so enamored.
It's very cute. I like how, yeah, during this Taurus season, there's been so much activity in the Taurus, with that conjunction, that your second house here is an Aries rising person. I like how the sun is kind of like, okay, we've been through the earthquake. Now let's get about and, let's focus on the business at hand and let's clean up and let's establish some roots again and calm down. Like there's something to that I think is helpful here, while you're dealing with that process of like, oh gosh, that major change I went through, it's really having a ripple effect into the way I set boundaries with people or the way I bump into other people's baggage. And, there's some really fruitful learning there. But
Mm, mm.
yeah, anyway, I think Laurie said all that very well. So awesome.
All right, let's move on to folks who have Taurus rising.
Right, so those of you with Taurus rising, this Scorpio full moon is landing in your seventh house. Before I get more into what that is, let's first address the fact that the Aries solar eclipse happened in your 12th house. So behind the scenes, this kind of major pivot, that has happened maybe on the subconscious level, maybe in the way that you're, I don't know, maybe you've had a big change in job, or maybe you're going off on a retreat or something like that, where you're occupying a different position, in the way you handle power in society. There's something afoot there. But no matter what, that solar eclipse is a long-term thing. It's at least a 6 months understanding. So you may not have a clue, what way that eclipse has impacted you. You may just really not know. But what I can tell you is the Scorpio full moon landing in your seventh house of partnerships is going to start revealing whatever that pivot, has done to you really, or is showing up for you in that way. What's going to happen is at the full moon, you really have an opportunity to see what's the ripple effect on your partnership. How are you feeling in your partnership? Like let yourself kind of watch the intense emotions that are being stirred up that are coming together in partnerships. Now, again, this can be a spouse, this can be a business relationship, this can be any one-on-one connection, but that's really where the Scorpio full moon is going to reveal the level or the depth of, where your emotions are with all of this change and pivot and everything that's happening in life. And then the other thing to think about is fortunately, as a Taurus rising person, you've had that crazy conjunction and Jupiter and Uranus in your first house, but now you have the sun there. The sun is, in my opinion, a calming influence here, a kind of like, okay, okay, Taurus rising person, you got this. You know how to be stable, you know how to maintain things. And sure, you may not, know exactly how to navigate change, but you can trust that innate piece about being a Taurus rising person, that ultimately you are innately wired to stabilize. So that's what the kind of Taurus sun I think can bring in, can really just say, okay, I got this. My feet are on the ground. I can breathe. That's okay. And then I can witness whatever feelings are really being stirred up in my partnerships,
Mhm.
based on the big pivot.
Mhm.
The other player here that we mentioned in the intro is just the fact that Pluto is squaring the full moon axis. And in your case, Pluto's up there in your 10th house. So that's just a longer, bigger, slower, um, big old shift that's happening for those of you with Taurus rising in your profession. There's some way the wheel is being turned, something is moving and changing, and it's a slow grinding process, but this full moon kind of gives you a little window
Mhm.
into that bigger process, and shows the ripple effect into those partnerships.
Mhm.
Again, could be business partnerships, but also might just be your spouse, or other connections. But anyway, that's kind of a synopsis of how these things work together. If you watch our other videos, you can start piecing things together and like write down for yourself what each thing means to you, and then you can create your own little map of how these are influencing you or affecting you, or how you want to take advantage of it,
Yeah.
depending on your point of view. So, yeah.
That's great. I think you covered that really well. I like thinking about how yeah, just how all of these work together. It's really fascinating. We've been going through this profound change with Pluto into Aquarius for a while now, and it's just I feel like this full moon happening after all these other pieces that we've been hammering on about is really putting us in a position where we can kind of start to take advantage of that change as well. And as we start to understand what it is, I feel
Mhm.
like ever since Pluto went into Aquarius, there's been a sense of just not I don't even know what the word is. For some reason, I'm missing the word, but just instability. There's so
Mhm.
much
Mhm.
instability. There's so much like we're not quite sure if our feet are firmly planted on the ground. And wherever Aquarius is a place where there's so much adjustment being required. And this full moon, this the intensity, the management of our intense emotions as we allow, with Taurus rising, as you allow the stability of your personality to support you in facing the emotional nature in relationship. This process is, I feel like it's really enabling you to see more clearly the change in your career as well.
Mhm.
Powerful time for all of us,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, especially like having a fixed sign rising and these things are this is a fixed sign T square. Like that's
Yeah.
anybody with a fixed sign rising will as we do more of these, we'll get into that. So
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
Okay, so for those with Gemini rising, this is putting the focus of the full moon on your sixth house. And the sixth house is, it's your day-to-day activities. You can think of it as healthcare, self-care, all the things that make up how you take care of your life in the day-to-day routines. It sounds like kind of a boring house, but in reality, it so much upholds how we function. We're not doing well if we don't have a handle on that house. So this is a time where there's a great deal of focus there, but before we really think too much of that, we want to think about the fact that this is coming off the big solar eclipse that happened in Aries 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks before this full moon, and that really provided you, those of you with Aries, with Gemini rising, there's a real pivot that occurred in how you receive support from others, from community, how you how you allow yourself to be supported by community. Some pivot that you may or may not be aware of at all at this point. But there's whatever that pivot is can now start to reveal itself in how you're navigating your day-to-day routines. I don't know how that's happening for you. Think about it. But there is a deep, intense emotional resonance in how you manage your day-to-day routines. With the sun having moved into Taurus shortly after that eclipse and the big explosion there. Watch these other videos. You're going to be able to make so much more sense of this if you watch the video about the solar eclipse as well as the video about the Jupiter Uranus conjunction. So there is a way in which the sun stepping into Taurus is really kind of doing a job of calming down the behind the scenes story of your own understanding of your inner nature. So there's a calming of your inner nature and a clarity of the intensity of your emotions in how you manage your day to day.
Mm,
you
okay.
know, the backdrop of that is that there's a profound change happening in your worldview. So you bring all of these things together, and this period is starting to reveal all of that. That's how I think of it. It's like this is starting to reveal the pivot that happened in your ability to receive from community, the very big slow movement of change in your worldview and the now calming of your system is all kind of being revealed through the um, day-to-day routines of your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like how you're talking about that because it is, say thinking here. I guess I was thinking like the sixth and the 12th house together too. It's like they make a statement about your health, your mental health, your physical health. And they don't necessarily make a statement like, oh no, it's more just paying attention to I don't know. I think because it's Gemini rising, I'm thinking about your nervous system here. How are you able to calm your nervous system? And the full moon is bringing to light, like, yes, it's your routines and the structure of your daily life, but I think about your practices. What are the practices? And they need to be deep, calming practices to work with your emotional material. And the biggest one that comes to mind is like if you're struggling with sleep, this is a good time to really delve further into that, where you need to kind of slow your nervous system down, is the big message. And at first, I just thought of sleep because it's always that thing. Most of the people struggle with sleep because of anxiety. That's
Mhm.
like the number one thing it ends up being. So there's something in here about like, just as Laurie said, calming down your system, and it's to do with your nervous system and your emotional and physical health here that could be really, really helpful. I also love the way it's like the full moon is like a moment, right? It's quick and boom. And then you have this like long, slow movement of Pluto. So I just want to get that across to folks that there's like these multiple levels of really quick to very slow and a couple things in between. And so that's what we're all of these together play into change, and all of those together like what you want to think about with this moment in time of how do you want to do something different in your routines.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, and really bringing your awareness to it.
Yeah.
That's, it's so interesting. Anyway, I'm kind of stuck thinking on a few people that I know with this
I know.
and how this is playing out. It's pretty
Mhm.
fascinating to watch it. Okay,
Yeah.
so we're going to move on to folks with Cancer rising. I know a few of these people too.
That's one or two of these.
Mhm.
Okay, so those of you with Cancer rising, let's just start with the full moon in Scorpio is landing in your fifth house of creativity. I'll unpack that a little more in a moment because first, what I want to really mention is that the Aries solar eclipse, for those of you with Cancer rising, it fell in your 10th house. Your 10th house is your profession and your social reputation. So one of those two things are both at the same time, the most public place in the whole chart. So there's some big shift afoot, a pivot afoot, based on that solar eclipse. Now these are slower cycles than usual. This is a 6 month and more cycle, and really represents the turning of the screw. Like something really different happening, and you may not know what it is yet, or maybe you know exactly what it is. It just depends on your life. But since it's an eclipse, like you're not going to know everything about it. That I can promise. But anyway, that's the backdrop, the solar eclipse. And so now at this moment in time, the Scorpio full moon is really illuminating something about your creative process that is very much tied and linked to that very public place of your chart. So there's something coming to light at this full moon that is going to let you kind of see into the depths a little bit of like what's the emotional need under here, like what's driving you forwards in terms of your creative processes. Um, let's talk a little more about the fifth house because the fifth house,
Mhm.
yes, it is creative process. It is also a playful place. It's a place where you want to take some risk and be game to take some risks, like play with things a little bit, check them out. It's also a place where you can be really generous, where this is your gift to the world, like where you have something to offer, that you are able to offer without any sort of bounds or controls on it, which is an interesting place to have Scorpio in that place of your gift to give to the world, because it implies that there's something deep and transformative and maybe emotionally relevant, that is part of that. So
Mhm.
that's kind of what the full moon's bringing up. The nice thing I like to think about here with the sun moving into Taurus is that the sun is coming into that Taurus place that's recently been jolted by the Uranus-Jupiter conjunction in Taurus. And now the sun is saying, all right, the earthquake's passed. So now I'm here to kind of help let's clean up, let's kind of stabilize things, let's reestablish some roots, like let's focus on having some stability. And so for those of you with Cancer rising, that stability is coming from your community. And again, a community is, in a nutshell, you can think about groups, just simply groups. But when you unpack it further, it's really the place where you accept the support of your community, where you feel like a community member, and you feel something larger than yourself. So this is really helpful for those of you with Cancer rising to have this kind of Taurus sun cleanup crew to come in and help you reset some roots after the joltiness that's been going on there. Um, so that's kind of like the picture, the final piece here on the big, long, slow thing is that Pluto is newly in Aquarius. It's in your eighth house. So the other little added side story here is something major that you're doing some work on is the way that you have boundaries with others, with other people, the way you set boundaries, the way you navigate other people's stuff by having your own healthy boundaries, and so there's some big change afoot that's kind of allowing you to unleash this power in the fifth house, and then to stabilize through the community in the 11th house. And that's a big long story, and definitely recommend that you watch the Pluto and Aquarius video to understand the bigger impacts of the long-term impacts of that. Because right now we've got that full moon in Scorpio, and that's really what's got your attention. So really paying attention to emotions in your creative processes.
Mm-hmm. That's
Yeah.
great. I feel like you covered everything really well. And I probably won't say anything other than repeating what you said, but I just, thinking it through, it's like, yeah, there's a pivot in the career area or the social reputation area. And then the sun moves into Taurus, settling down. That I love how you called it the cleanup crew. It's like settling down, what your expectations are in community, how you receive from community and now being able to see, there's some connection here with the pivot in your social reputation or career. There's some awareness begins in that creative process that is all linked to this deep underground movement of how you navigate other people's stuff. It's pretty powerful. It's pretty
Yeah.
powerful. And yeah, I mean, it is. It's a full moon. It's one moment, but it's a moment of awareness
Mm.
after a eclipse, which wasn't just the simple planting of a seed. It was this major pivot moment. Yeah, major processes going on. Okay.
All
So I
right.
think now we're going to move on to folks who have Leo rising. So if you've got Leo rising, the full moon itself is happening in your fourth house. And the fourth house is about home and family. So as you can see, these are angular houses. This is a very, very big story for people with Leo rising because of the houses that are involved.
Mhm.
So if you've got Leo rising, your connection to home and family holds this incredible intensity anyway, with Scorpio being there in your fourth house. But before we keep flying in 10 directions, let's focus on the fact that the eclipse itself occurred in your ninth house. So what we're looking at is a situation where there has been, whether you're aware of it or not, you're probably maybe just becoming aware of it. This full moon may begin the process of becoming aware of it, but there has been this pivot that's happened or is happening within your worldview, your understanding of the greater world, the big picture of life on planet Earth. So this pivot in your worldview, which is kind of been occluded, now at the full moon, you start to see how your emotions, your deep, powerful emotions toward home and family are connected, possibly with that worldview. And yeah, so you're paying attention to your emotions around home and family. The sun having moved into Taurus is trying to calm the system down after this big pivot from the eclipse and after the big wake up call of Uranus and Jupiter quite recently there in Taurus. I like how Jennie in the last one talked about the sun coming in with the cleanup crew to calm things down in this area. So there's a calming effect in your career, social reputation area that is kind of showing you the intensity of your relationship to home and family and how that all connects to your worldview. Now, the kind of background situation here that we're looking at is that Pluto has quite recently entered your seventh house. So the backdrop to all of this is that intense, powerful, slow moving change, transformation, an overused word, but it's hard to get away from it when it comes to Pluto because Pluto does transform. And the transformation that's going on that is also being highlighted here is around your most significant partnerships, whether they be your marriage partner or your business partnership. There's a big change happening there that you are also really aware of in this process.
Mm-hmm.
It's fascinating to think about that, just to link those together. And I don't know if the way I talked about it linked them, but I can see that pivot of worldview, that calming of the social reputation, showing you the intensity within the home and family that is all connected to that background dramatic change of relationship.
Mm. Yeah, I like how you brought right in the beginning, you talked about the angular houses, as a Leo, as a fixed sign person, in this case, Leo rising, it means that it's the angular houses, the first, the fourth, the seventh, and the 10th that are involved in this process. So those are very powerful because they all have to do with I just think of it as like your identity in different ways. But what's interesting to me about that fourth house and having the Scorpio moon, and I really like how Laurie, you've been talking about it as a moment of awareness because it's fleeting, it's very quick. You can go out and admire that full moon, but it's quick. And so what the awareness is about is there's something here for me about just getting really stable and understanding of your own intense emotions, like just being like connected to them, like recognizing them and going, yep, I have intense feelings in my home life, and recognizing them and kind of, allowing them. And that's where the stability comes from. The like, oh no, I know myself. And wherever you have Scorpio in your chart is a place you really need to get to know yourself on a
Mm.
deep, deep level, on a deep emotional level, wounds, traumas, issues, and all. Like that's what you're investigating. And so to have this full moon shining a light in the fourth house of your kind of overall foundation, it's a powerful moment to go, you know what? I've got myself. I've got this. I've got the understanding of my own intensity here, and I can work with that. And that's kind of what you're setting the stage for, because there's so much change. Unfortunately, these are all fixed signs. So you
Mm.
kind of got to take advantage of what's good here. And what is good here is the stability that's available from those fixed signs, So something cool here about resetting your foundation as a Leo rising person.
I,
Oh,
yeah, I keep thinking about just using the stability of your social
mm.
reputation to help stabilize that home and family area.
Yeah.
I
Yeah. And it's like, yeah.
Yeah, it's really fascinating to think about it. Okay, let's move on to folks who have Virgo rising.
Oh, Virgo risings. I know a few of these folks in the world.
Just a few.
Just a few. I actually do know quite a few people in close quarters to me. So anyway, those of you with Virgo rising, this Scorpio full moon is landing its big, bright, bold self right in your third house. The quick version of the third house is communication, your voice. So think about that. Before I delve further into that, I also want to mention unavoidably that the Aries solar eclipse that just happened on April 8th for you was landed in your eighth house. Those of you with Virgo rising, your eighth house, that eighth house is a place of dealing with other people's baggage and the values and money and that sort of thing. So there is a big pivot afoot in terms of how you manage that with other people. And the eighth house really refers to knowing yourself on a deeper level, really, so that you know how to set the boundaries you need so you can navigate everybody else's emotional stuff and everyone else doing their thing, and just, being able to work with it, not throwing up a wall, but also not allowing people in, too much. There's a balance there. So there's a big pivot in that area of your life, which you may or may not be aware of, or you may have a glimmer of awareness. But it's tricky. That eighth house is pretty secret. So it might be a long time before you really have a clue what that's about. And that's okay. Because this full moon is most certainly going to show you some sort of glimpse. It's going to show you a way that suddenly you feel perhaps more empowered, to do something new and different in the way that you speak. There's a empowerment here with the way you speak. And again, speaking can be writing. It doesn't have to be verbal. And it's, in general, it's the way that you navigate your environment, the way you kind of move around your immediate environment. Like, how do you buy your groceries? What neighbors do you encounter as you walk down the street? Do you go to your local coffee shop? Those are kind of third house places. So at any rate, the Scorpio full moon is showing you a moment of time of maybe a new way that you're going to be using your voice based on your new understanding that has happened, at that solar eclipse. The other things to think about during this full moon is where the sun is. The sun is in Taurus, and it's, recently we've had this big kind of, I kind of think of it as an earthquake, a big jolt of Jupiter, Uranus conjuncting, and now that has broken apart. The earthquake has happened, and the sun is coming into your ninth house of your worldview and kind of being like, okay, we can settle down now. You can start picking up the pieces. You can start witnessing what has changed from all these things. How has your mentality and the way you look at the world now, how is it changing? Based on these two other things I mentioned, like what is going on, in the way that you approach things, because there's something shift there, and it's nice. It's kind of like calming it down, like, woo, let's come out the other side of this. So that's also playing into the picture here. And then the final piece that Laurie and I've been talking about is kind of in the background as being a big machine humming away, and it's going to hum away for 20 more years. And that's the machine of Pluto in Aquarius. And for those of you with Virgo rising, that Pluto in Aquarius is a long, slow, empowerment possibility available through the way you handle your routines, the way you take care of your health, the way you make sure that you're doing the things, you're eating the right way for you, you're resting the right way for you, that you're having an understanding about what you need to do here, to maintain health, to maintain the way that you look after yourself. So that's kind of like the backdrop story. And then just to link it back together, this full moon is saying, all right, well, part of this picture is how you use your voice, how you recognize the intensity of your emotions, that is Scorpio, and how you want to speak about that. How do you want to speak about that with other people as your worldview really settles and changes here? So something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like that. And thinking about just the intensity of your emotions connected to your voice.
Mm.
And really being able to see that,
Mm.
coming out of this pivot around how you navigate other people. I don't know. For some reason, this feels quite personal to me. But
Yes.
there is this awareness of a pivot of navigating other people, and then the necessity of um, of stabilizing the worldview in order to express deep emotion. It's an interesting one for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
any
Just think the connection between the eighth and the third, right?
It's interesting. It's
Yeah.
definitely an interesting, and you with all of these, the connection between where the pivot happened and where the moon is, they're both ruled by Mars. So there's a connection there, to consider as well. They're both such important houses to be looked at. Yeah.
I
Interesting
just
to think
I
about.
keep thinking there's something about like whatever you've learned from the solar eclipse in the eighth house, like those new boundaries and whatever. Like you're you can trust that there's a change there and that you're going to be able to speak about it. There's a little bit
Right.
of that feeling to it
Yeah.
for some reason. Like
Yeah.
just you've undergone this thing in the eighth, and now
Yeah.
you're gonna do well. Just don't be overly volatile. Just be in touch with your own feelings, and then you'll know. So.
It kind of makes me laugh because I do have Virgo rising, that I am reading a book right now called Super Communicators, which is a absolutely fascinating book. I heard an interview with the author, and it's just absolutely fascinating. And as we're talking about this, it's like, oh, that's what that book is. It's about, yeah. At any rate,
Perfect.
it really is. It's by, oh, I should remember the author's name. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Super Communicators. Look it up. It's a great book. Okay, so we're going to move on now to folks who have Libra rising. If you've got Libra rising, the full moon here is occurring in your second house. And just briefly, we'll come back and talk about it after. But briefly, the second house is your own self-worth, how you, yeah, your own self-valuing, and your money, resources, all of those things that are connected there. I'm having a little bit of a cat problem, I have to say. And I think what I want to do is pause very quickly. I apologize. I apologize. I have to. I have to pause the recording for a second. Okay, I assume that folks can forgive us for having a slight cat distraction occasionally.
Abstraction.
Um, okay, I'm going to just start over with the Libra rising. So
Great.
if you've got Libra rising, this full moon is happening in your second house. And the second house is about money, resources, self-worth, how you navigate your own value of yourself. So that's where the full moon is happening, but we need to talk before we really dig into that. We want to think about where the eclipse has happened. And this most recent solar eclipse happened in your seventh house. So we want to think that there's been some sort of a really major pivot in the area of your partnerships, intimate kind of one-on-one relationships. It could be a marriage or a spousal relationship or a business partnership. There's been some pivot there. You may or may not know what that is. It's something that's shifted, and you are probably grappling to get a view of it. And this full moon is likely to be the very first beginnings of getting some clarity on that. So as that pivot happens, and then the sun moves into Taurus, trying to calm down that area of Taurus after the big explosive story of the Uranus-Jupiter conjunction that has also just recently happened there. So we're trying to calm down this area of the eighth house, which is how we navigate other people's boundaries, other people's resources, all of this intense area where we navigate ourselves in relationship to others. So that calming is highlighting our own worth and value. Where there's, people with Libra rising hold so much intensity around that area. Their own self-worth can be a place of deep struggle and deep intensity there.
Mm-hmm.
So, the sun, as it comes off this eclipse and goes into this area, calming us, wants to show us something about our own value. I feel like there's something there, like the pivot in relationship is beginning to be shown to us through our own value. And that
Mm-hmm.
could show up in a story about money or resources, or just in how you're feeling about your own self-worth
Mm-hmm.
coming off that pivot. And then there's the background story of Pluto having recently, the very slow background movement. And I love how, Jennie, you've been talking about, yeah, this full moon is just a moment. It's a moment that shows us something. And one of the storylines that it's asking us to look back on is this very, very slowly developing transformation of how we give of ourselves. Libra, people with Libra rising struggle a lot with um, that whole issue of trying to please others. That can be a lifelong issue for people with Libra rising. And with Pluto going into the fifth house, it's like, how do you learn to give of yourself without giving yourself away? And I think that's a lot of what we're learning here, and a lot of what this full moon is kind of showing us, how to value ourselves more deeply in order to learn new ways to give of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's great. Everything you've said is, really makes sense. And like I think I just want to accent that by just it's isn't it just funny to me how um Libra and Taurus are both ruled by Venus. So Venus for a Libra rising person is a key player. So those of you who are
Mhm.
listening, check out where your natal Venus is for some more clues. But what I like about this picture is it's kind of like you come in as a Libra rising person. Here you are doing your Libra, the things you've talked about, the challenge around possibly being people pleasing, but also being conflict avoidance. So anything that makes you uncomfortable as a Libra rising person, you may just avoid it. So that's also an issue. But what's cool about having Taurus in the eighth house is it's kind of saying, no, I'm sorry, you don't get off the hook. You still have to deal with the deeper repercussions here. You have to get into the having to navigate other people's stuff. And I like that statement. And then just this full moon bringing in the very firmly saying, hey, do you value yourself enough? Like, can you
Mm.
value yourself as a pretty deeply emotional person? Can you recognize that? And then also, can you recognize what a tremendous resource that is to have the depth of emotion in your second house? Like, you really are a source, like a resource for that. And you may not be able to quite see that, but this full moon is going to acquaint you with that on deeper levels. That's kind of my little picture I wanted to pop in there. I mean, you mostly said, I mean, you did say it, but I said this different image that came in. So
Well, I love that. Yeah, just Libra rising, really going into allowing your deep emotions to connect you to your own value.
yeah.
That's
Mhm.
really powerful, powerfully important for Libra
Yes.
rising people. Okay, let's move on to folks who have Scorpio rising.
Oh, Scorpio rising. So, wow. So, Scorpio rising folks, you've got this this amazing full moon landing right in your first house, the most personal house in the whole chart, the most powerful house in the whole chart. That really just this place that is about you, the self. So that's what the full moon is illuminating. Um, the other thing to consider before we get a little more into that, I just want to remind you that the Aries solar eclipse happened 2 weeks before this. And that extremely powerful eclipse, which represents a pivot point, happened in your sixth house of your routines, your practices, the way you take care of yourself. Laurie, I think earlier you said health care and self care. Yes. So some sort of shift happening in that arena that you may or may not know what that is yet. It might be something you're like, yep, I know exactly that I need to change, blah, 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 or you might not know because it's an eclipse, it's occluded, it's not necessarily obvious, and that may unfold over the course of the next 6 months or so, or even longer. So there's that piece. But what the Scorpio full moon brings in, because it's just that, one moment in time, it's the 2 weeks later lunation after that powerful eclipse. And it's really just revealing something very important about your character, about something about who you fundamentally are and how you move in the world. Like you are a Scorpio rising person. That means that brings in the power of water, the kind of hidden waters of Scorpio,
Mm.
the undercurrents of our emotions that run through everything. And as a Scorpio rising person, you're constantly working with that, either feeling your own or seeing other people's intensity. And you can see the kind of emotions underneath the surface of everything. And so this full moon is letting you go, oh yeah, I am that. I do have that. I am aware of other people's feelings, of my feelings. I am aware that I carry a intensity and an empowerment with me. So that's kind of what the full moon brings up. Because we're in Taurus season and this is a full moon, by definition, it brings the polarity now of the other person. You have the sun in Taurus in the seventh house. I've been thinking about the sun here as hopefully bringing in a calming effect to that seventh house of partnership, because there's been so much intensity there with the Jupiter Uranus conjunction. And now the sun is kind of coming in to say, all right, we're in Taurus season now. So let's, reconnect the roots. Let's, kind of clean up, shore things up, like reestablish like what some kind of stability
Mm.
here is what the sun is really
Yeah.
bringing in. So I like that. Like think about like, your partnerships, and that can be your spouse, your business partners, anybody in your life that you have one of those one-on-one connections with, where it's a back and forth. So think about that effect during this time.
Mm.
Um, and then the one final piece that Laurie and I have been throwing in is I was thinking about it being the machine humming around, humming behind the scenes. Like you can kind of hear it, but you don't really know what it is. And that is the planet Pluto that is squaring this polarity at the full moon. And Pluto for you, Scorpio rising, is stirring the pot very deeply in the very roots and foundations of your being, your home life, your house, your lineage. Lots of levels there with the fourth house. But that's what's happening it's a private house, so it's very quietly humming away. And this is a long-term impact, a long-term opportunity to completely reform and redo the way you're handling this area of your life, either your physical home life or your deep internal integrated part of your personality going through that shift. So it's kind of bringing together all these different layers of time, and then to just the refocus back on, wow, that Scorpio moon is laying right in your first house. So what is showing up?
Yeah. Yeah, really being able to see the depth of your emotional nature. Yeah, it's so funny. People with Scorpio rising are so deeply, deeply emotional, and yet there's that tendency to want to kind of keep that part of the self private. And the yeah, just thinking about the pattern of the pivot happening in the routines, the
Mm,
awareness of it happening right in the emotional, your emotional self-expression, and then that underground shift happening in the home and family, and the stabilizing effect of the relationship.
mm,
As you were talking about the sun moving into Taurus and kind of calming things down after the big explosiveness of Uranus and Jupiter, I was just thinking about the season, Taurus season. And I was thinking about it here where I live on the coast of Maine, and how much the coast itself has been battered,
mm,
just battered through the storms that we've had in recent months. And thinking about that Uranus, Jupiter, the earth being battered. And then, okay, it's Taurus season, it's spring. The
mm,
tourists are going to be here soon. So we've got to get out there. We've got to straighten things out. We've got to clean up the mess.
mm,
And that's really the sun going into Taurus. It's time to make sure the flowers are growing, make sure things are prepared. It's just so interesting to think of that. And that with Scorpio rising, maybe your most intimate partnerships have been kind of battered with big change, but this is really allowing you, this full moon really giving you a view of how you can bring your emotional nature and the stability of partnership together to stabilize yourself and your partner and your home. I mean, these all work together. That's really kind of cool.
mm, mm-hmm.
Okay, so we're going to move on to folks who have Sagittarius rising. If you've got Sagittarius rising, um, the full moon itself, the Scorpio full moon, is happening in your 12th house. Uh, we're going to just say for the moment, the 12th house it's considered the hidden house. We can think of it as our, hidden processes, our psychological deep processes. Um, Before we really do too much thinking about that, we want to understand that this full moon is coming off of the new moon solar eclipse that happened 2 weeks before, that happened in your fifth house. So that tells us that at the eclipse, a pivot has occurred within the area of your creativity, how you give of yourself most unconditionally. This could relate to all kinds of things around your creativity, around children, around love affairs, how you give of yourself. That pivot, because it's an eclipse, it's not clear. It's not like a clear statement of what has occurred there. You very likely are pretty cloudy in really understanding what the pivot has been and where it's taking you. This full moon allows you to see through, which is kind of tricky to think of. It's the 12th house. It's Scorpio. It's not real clear. But where you want to go to get some clarity is a real deep inner contemplation of your own deepest hidden nature. And that's about as clear as I think you're going to get. People with Sagittarius rising, their deepest, most profound emotional nature is really tucked away. And it's really important to find the time and to find the space to really explore that. And this full moon really provides that. You think about the sun at this time having moved into Taurus, fall on the heels of that big Uranus Jupiter conjunction. So something in that area, the sixth house of your day-to-day routines, your health practices, how you take care of yourself. There's been some upheaval there that now with the sun going in there, it's like, okay, time to calm this area down. Time to understand that it's Taurus season. It's time to go out and plant the flowers, stabilize your routines in some way after that upheaval. And that practice, stabilizing, planting your gardens, stabilizing your routines in some way allows you the space to go into that deep emotion and work with it.
Mm.
The backdrop of all of this is the profound, deep change that Pluto represents in direct connection with this full moon. The change of Pluto in your third house, which really is telling us that there is a profound shift, long-term shift in how you communicate, how you use your voice, your relationships with your environment. The full moon itself is such a, it's a fleeting moment. It's a moment of awareness. It's like, oh, okay, there's a stabilization that's allowing me to sit down and go internal and find where those deep emotions are being impacted by the the pivot point in creativity. That's the pivot showing us this clarity of emotion. And it's all kind of acting out in the profound change in how you use your voice.
Mm-hmm.
That's a powerful placement, that moon, that full moon in the 12th house. It's kind of tricky, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, well, I was thinking, there's lots of different meanings to the 12th house. I mean, Demetra George has written that one book. There's a massive chapter about the 12th house. So
Yeah.
I just want to say there's a lot of layers there. And what came to mind as you were talking is like, so people with Sagittarius rising and having Scorpio back in that 12th house, like the degree to which you can kind of understand yourself as an emotional person, understand your emotions is the degree to which you can unleash your intuition, which can be open to much deeper layers, many other dimensions and deeper psychic layers than the average Joe. Okay. So I think that the Scorpio moon is giving you a moment to really recognize that in yourself, recognizing the power of your intuition, and trusting it. You don't need to know every last detail about where the information comes from. You just need to know that it's come up for you and you're ready to go with it because, this is what's happening for you. And I think the Pluto in the third house, the long, slow thing is more like, hey, you can start talking about this with people. You can start sharing your intuition. You can start downloading your insights in a mundane third house way, which is your daily conversations, your conversations with your familiars, your neighbors, your siblings, those things. So it's time to start, there's a moment in time here of saying, hey, you can start sharing the depth of what you see and know. And as a Sagittarius rising person, you are here to spread wisdom. You are absolutely here. So this is how I see that moment and how to relate it to the long, slow process of the third house Pluto. So anyway.
Yeah. Spreading wisdom as long as you've developed it.
Right. But that's what the full moon's for, though, is becoming aware of how aware are you? And if you're sitting here going, I'm not in touch with my emotions, you got some work to do on
Right.
understanding that,
Yeah.
right? On
Yeah. Yeah.
developing self-awareness. So
Yeah, that's really interesting. Okay, I could go down a rabbit hole here, but I'm gonna let it slide, and we're gonna move on to folks that have Capricorn rising.
go down to a snake hole instead. All right. That was a leftover from the last one. So those of you with Capricorn rising, this Scorpio moon, full moon, is landing in your 11th house. In a nutshell, 11th house of those public groups. I'm going to get more into that in a moment because before that, I just want to point out that we have had this powerful solar eclipse on April 8th, 2 weeks before this full moon. And that, I mean, it's so powerful for all of us, but for those of you with Capricorn rising, that solar eclipse landed in your fourth house and basically means that there's some kind of pivot happening in your family of origin, your family at home that you live with now, or maybe some kind of understanding about your lineage, or on a very psychological level, the foundation of your personality. There's some kind of shift, some wake up, some courageous call to action that's happening here for you in the fourth house. And I'm mentioning it because the full moon illuminates some of whatever that pivot that's happening in your fourth house. Because it was an eclipse, you probably don't know all of it. Maybe you feel it. You may not see what unfolds for the next 6 months or even a year out from it, or longer, depending on your chart. So there's something that you don't necessarily know, but the Scorpio full moon is revealing kind of right now this layer of like, yeah, but you're showing up differently in groups now. There's something coming to light. So groups, the 11th house where the full moon is, this is your community. And you are one member of that community. So this is the community that supports you. And the skill to gain here is to allow your community to support you. And with all of these intense emotions that you as a Capricorn rising person has, and that Scorpio in the 11th house, like, yeah, you need support. You need to find your people. You need to find those people you can be vulnerable with, and I'm talking about on a collective level. This isn't like a one-on-one personal level. This is like, who are the group of people that can support the fact that you feel these intense emotions, and they're out there. I promise you, they are. So that Scorpio full moon is giving you a moment of awareness about that and just going, oh, there is, maybe you've already started to find some of those people. Maybe you can identify a couple of them or something. But really this moment of like, I can get the support. I have these intense feelings and I can be part of a community that embraces this, that welcomes this, that I can feel supported. So that's kind of the full moon piece. Because there's other things in play here. And part of it is we are at a full moon. So you've got to look at the Taurus house where the sun is. They're in an opposition. So where the sun is in your fifth house of your creative processes. So there may have been some kind of, Laurie said earlier, an explosion or an earthquake or some kind of shift because we had the Uranus-Jupiter conjunction here in your fifth house just a couple days before this. And now the sun is in there going, hey, you know what? We can calm down now. The earthquake has happened. And now it's just time to kind of pick things up, clean things up, maybe and tidy things and beautify, being the fifth house, like really wanting to kind of make things bring joy and allow you to be playful again after some changes. So that sounds pretty helpful. It's kind of like, nope, you can stabilize. on a psychological level, it's the way you give love. So you can really stabilize that for this Taurus season. And think about, the seasons are changing. It's time to, I think Laurie's been saying this earlier about kind of regrounding yourself in the seasons, like get outside, like allow that, because that's going to support whatever the more emotional process is in the groups. Um, and then the final piece that we talked about at the beginning of this video was the fact that Pluto, the great transformational planet, is squaring this axis pretty tightly. So that means you just need to kind of give a nod to that. There's a long, slow process happening here for you that has to do with the way you value yourself. You're in the midst of, or I should say, the beginning of making some change in the way you value yourself, the way you handle your finances. There might be something about investments or some bigger way that you're using money with Pluto there. I don't know. But somehow that's part of this picture. And the way it relates is that's a really long, slow 20-year major process. And then this full moon is like an instant. So in this instant, you kind of get to see the power of your emotions, the power of your feelings, and really allow yourself to be supported in community through that Scorpio full moon. That's the quick now version while these other things are going on. So I hope
Yeah.
that makes sense.
It's great to just think about this moment, this full moon, the illumination of emotions, and the emotions being attached to how you allow yourself to receive from others. A pivot in your relationships with family members, with home, a deep, powerful, slow moving change in terms of your own self-worth. And at this moment, seeing how you can receive the support that you need. If you've got Capricorn rising, you've got Scorpio in that 11th house, it is a powerful, you really need an emotionally powerful support from community. It's really important. And this is a time where you can begin to see how that relates to these other big issues and big changes going on. And yeah, meanwhile, that cleanup crew around your creativity. I loved it when you said that earlier, that the sun in going into Taurus is bringing the cleanup crew. It's like, okay, let's plant those flowers. Let's beautify our creative processes. That's really a powerful. I love this. I love, bringing these different pieces together at the full moon here.
Mhm.
Okay, so we're going to move now to folks who have Aquarius rising. Now, if you've got Aquarius rising, the illumination, the full moon is happening right up there in the 10th house, one of the most significant houses in the chart. This is very, very powerful for people with Aquarius rising. The 10th house really illuminates at this full moon. What's being really illuminated is your career or your social reputation, how the world sees you. So that's what's being illuminated. But we really have to think about where we're at. And where we're at right now at this full moon is we are coming off the most recent new moon, which was extremely intense, the complete full solar return in Aries. So we have to understand that this is the very beginning illumination of whatever that eclipse brought. And for you with Aquarius rising, what that eclipse is speaking to is a pivot that is occurring in your third house being the area of how you use your voice, how you engage with your neighborhood, how you bring your understanding into communication, into your neighborhood, into your relationships with the people around you, siblings or neighbors, that kind of thing. So there's a big pivot in how you use your voice that you don't really understand probably, because that the eclipse is the moon occluding the sun. It was not clear. It is not clear. At this point, we begin to get an understanding. So the understanding is coming through our emotional understanding of who we are regarding our social reputation or our career. In thinking about that, we've got to think of both sides of this polarity when there's a full moon. We've got the illumination of that emotional, very public place where we hold these deep emotions. And on the other side, Taurus down here in the area of home and family. We're also just coming off of this big conjunction between Uranus and Pluto. I mean, Uranus and Jupiter. Uranus and Pluto, no. Thank goodness that's not what's been happening. Uh, so we're coming off that. And when the sun moved into Taurus, the way we've been thinking about it, I love how Jenny has talked about it as the cleanup crew. It's like this explosive thing happened in this house. Something in the home and family has shifted or is shifting quite dramatically. The sun moves in here and it's like, okay, we're bringing the cleanup crew. It's time to plant the flowers. It's time to calm things down. It's time to clean up whatever has occurred here. And that process of stabilizing and cleaning up whatever's going on in that fourth house, home, family, is allowing you to really see your emotional connection to your career or your social reputation. Now, at the same time, and that is also being highlighted because Pluto is exactly squaring this opposition, we have to look at the fact that Pluto has just quite recently moved into your first house. This is huge for you. With Aquarius rising, this is such an important full moon for you to pay attention to because it's highlighting all the way that you are managing these most basic parts of who you are, your personality, who you show up to be in your personality. That first house, it's the most personal place in the chart, and you are being changed radically. How people see you, who people understand you to be, who you understand you to be, is being transformed. This moment of this full moon is kind of giving you a way to see that through your emotional connection to your work and the stability that you're developing within your home.
Nice. Yeah. What a moment, right? For an Aquarius rising
Yeah,
person, just
yeah.
having that Pluto in the T square there. Yeah, really interesting. Well, I think you covered that beautifully. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I guess the only thing I just like my brain starts stirring around all the words you said, and just it's so interesting to have Scorpio at the most public part of the chart, right? To have this very private, emotional self, and there's something here about it's also I think of Scorpio as such the source of our power, like when you really reckon with your own emotions and your feelings and you recognize how intuitive you can be like once you kind of work through some of that stuff and to use that as kind of your I don't know the way you move through the world in this very public space. And I mean I can think of some folks with this, and it's the people I have in mind are definitely healers. They're the people who can help others heal, and it's because they've had to work through some of their own emotional stuff. And I say some because you know what? None of us works through 100% of our emotional stuff. All that matters is that you commit to doing the work and then you work and wherever you get, you get. But that's the idea. So there's something potent here, very, very potent. And just being like, yep, this is who I am and this is what's going on. And I'm going to show up that way publicly. So
Yeah.
but anyway,
Yeah.
you said a lot of good stuff.
It's so funny. I'm just thinking about a particular friend of mine who has this, and I know that she's in the midst of, her whole backyard has to be dug up because of flooding, because of all this stuff happening with the earth. There's this big explosive thing happening, getting ready to happen in her fourth house. Guess what? And as we're talking about this, I'm thinking, oh, just plant the flowers. Just
Yeah.
just plant the flowers. It's so interesting to see how these things play out in people's lives. Okay,
Yeah. So many
so
different stories. Yeah.
yeah. Okay, so let's move on to folks who have Pisces rising.
Okay, so those of you with Pisces rising, the Scorpio full moon is landing in your ninth house. That is an illumination of something to do with, the way you think critically, the worldview that you hold. So something coming into view at this full moon there. Before we get into a little bit more of that, let's kind of back up and talk about that crazy, awesome solar eclipse in Aries that happens, because that's the kind of this, the seed moment for this full moon. And in your case, Pisces rising, that seed moment fell in your second house. This is the second house of how you value yourself, how you deal with your resources, your possessions, your finances are all part of that second house. So there's some kind of pivot or change or something that is really happening there. The core kernel internal piece really is about how you value yourself. So it's maybe something that you are aware of already. You're like, yes, I am making changes. I am valuing myself more. Something has happened here. Or you may not be aware of it. Because it's an eclipse and it takes a while to figure these things out. But in any case, that's what happened at that solar eclipse. And now the Scorpio full moon is starting to reveal the way that the ripple effect of whatever that changes in how it's impacting the way you think of the world, the way you view the world. You have Scorpio here, so there's a big connection with power in the way that you see the world, in particular emotional power is tied into that. So the Scorpio full moon is really bringing that up, like letting you see a couple things, either the way you view the world through an emotional lens, an emotionally powerful lens, or the way you may sort of think the world is a very unpredictable and emotional place. It's a two-way street. So, kind of think about yourself and where you kind of fall. Where does that fit for you at this moment in time? Because it's a full moon, we also want to think about where the sun is, because they're directly opposite from each other. So here, the sun is in your third house of how you communicate. We've recently had a big old earthquake here when Jupiter and Uranus came together just a couple days before this. And now the sun is saying, yeah, you know what? It's still Taurus season. It's still time to stabilize. It's still time to calm. It's still time to, on a personal level, become embodied, really kind of get our feet on the ground and feel what does it mean to be grounded. Just in this 1 second, this one moment, you can experience that. Even as other things are woo all around you, you can still kind of have your feet on the ground and go, yep. Because that's really going to help you as you stabilize how you communicate with others. It's going to help this more emotional layer of the Scorpio full moon and what that's bringing up for you. The other piece that Laurie and I talked about in the opening to this was the fact that Pluto is in the mix of this full moon. Pluto is in a square angle, a pretty close to 90-degree angle to the sun-moon opposition. In your case, Pluto is very much behind the scenes in the 12th house. Pluto is referring to a long-term 20-year process of big change that's kind of grinding away in the background. And for those of you with Pisces rising, it is really in the background because the 12th house is it's your subconscious processes. It's, your spirituality, your view of the collective. These, in other words, big giant things that you can't always be connected with. You don't always know where you feel or how you fall on all that stuff. Even your own unconscious is a mystery. And so there's a big sort of shift in the way you're handling that background thing. I also think about like Pluto going into that 12th house could be a big shift in the way that you show up in society, like that you have become a person who is stepping into a new power role, like a politician or a CEO of a company could also have that kind of 12th house thing because you're behind the scenes making impact. So that's the kind of the quiet, long story. And then the full moon really right now is saying, all right, what's your worldview? How do you fit intense emotions into that? What is it? And how do you draw power from your worldview? So.
And
Mhm.
how do you calmly speak about your intense worldview?
Yeah.
You think about that sun in Taurus, it's like shining a light on the intensity of your worldview, but it's also asking you to, like you said earlier, the sun moving into Taurus as the cleanup crew after the big shift explosiveness of the Uranus Jupiter conjunction. It's like, okay, there's been this big explosiveness. You, as a Pisces rising, have an intense worldview or an intense relationship with your understanding of the greater world. But right now, you need to bring the calm to it. You need to plant the flowers and settle down your rhetoric in some way.
Mm,
And maybe just really bring people together, bring a connection there. It's
nice,
an
Lori.
interesting way to look at it. It's so funny to think about Pisces rising people, just how they kind of approach the world in this kind of dreaminess. I always think of people with Pisces rising as showing up with a lot of dreaminess about them. And yet, when it comes to their worldview, they have like big, intense emotions. You might not know that about your Pisces rising friends, but when it comes to their worldview, they
Mm.
have powerful emotions there. And those powerful emotions right now are beginning that illumination process on the pivot of their own self-worth.
Yeah, I really like you gave me a pretty good image there of the like coming in and talking calmly and slowly
Yeah.
about these intense things, and then also the second little piece of information that came to me was just the idea that, we're in a pivot as a culture, as a globe towards really getting in touch with feelings, getting in touch with relating to everybody, like recognizing we're in relationship with each other, with the other creatures and beings that live on this planet, the planet itself, so on and so forth. These big concepts, which ties in very well with being a Pisces rising person, like kind of the concept of some of our Pisces rising people or people who have prominent Pisces being the kind of the leaders that are coming in, the people who can say, hey, we've got to deal with the suffering and we've got to work with that. So that's another thing just to think about as a Pisces rising person, like how you walk in the world is very helpful right now, very important right now, especially. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Well, I think that we have come to the end of all 12 signs. I'm glad there's not 18 signs.
huzzah.
Well, 12 is plenty. So thank you so much, Jenny. It's been great having this conversation with you, and I look forward to the next one we get to do.
Thank you, Lori, and thank you everybody for watching.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye.